Rotary kilns, processing material at high temperatures and maintaining a controlled environment. I'm going to give you a heads up. This is going to be a different format of essay than what I've been posting, especially within the last few months. I will give you information on the topic in the title, and then I'm going to compare it to a personal story. The reason I'm choosing to do that instead of scrapping the idea and coming up with a new one is because this topic still catches my eye. There's just not a ton of information to go over. It's an industrial machine that helps in a ton of applications and processes and supports sustainability, but that's about all I can find. Not even much on Reddit, and you can find information, perhaps not always the most accurate, on just about anything there. With that being said, rotary kilns. What are they used for? Calcination, heat setting, organic combustion, sintering/induration, thermal desorption. This is from FECO International, FEECO 2025. What do all of these words mean? Calcination is a thermal treatment of a solid material at a high enough temperature with limited to no air or oxygen to remove volatile substances or cause chemical decomposition. Wikipedia Contributors 2019. Heat setting refers to a specific temperature that a material is fired to achieve the desired transformation. Gable 2023. I'm also kind of just hoping that that's the right definition because finding heat setting by itself is an impossible search, but this definition refers to a pottery kiln, seems appropriate enough still. Organic combustion is the treatment of organic waste at high temperature to reduce mass and volume, frequently used in waste processing plants to reduce waste flow into landfills. FECO and SEAM 2020, and that's again FEECO, FECO. Sintering is done to a material to compact and form a solid mass through pressure or heat without melting it into a liquid. Wikipedia Contributors 2020. Induration is basically one of the final steps in hardening a material. First, iron pellets are blended from limestone, coal, and obviously iron, all in the desired proportions before being grinded together. Then the product is added to a mixer with bentonite for binding and water, which forms a green powder. The green powder is sent to a machine that spits out small circular pellets from 6 to 18 millimeters. These pellets are finally hardened in an indurating unit furnace with controlled heating. Each are made to fit certain specifications, which they are then tested in a lab to confirm they meet those standards. Lulum et al. 2024. Lastly, thermal desorption is a process that removes contaminants from a material. The machine, called a thermal desorber, heats them to make them no longer stick. Desorb equals unstick. To sediment, sludge, or soil by evaporating the contaminant. As they evaporate, the contaminants become separated from the solid material. It can be used to remove gasoline, which easily evaporates, as well as diesel, coal, tar, and some pesticides, which take higher temperatures to vaporize. Office of Land and Emergency Management 2021. Common applications. Rotary kilns are quite useful in their flexibility, and while they were originally developed for the cement industry, today they are found in many industries. Some of the most common applications include catalyst activation, gypsum and bauxite calcinating, desorption of soil contaminants, waste incineration, plastics and ceramics processing, activated carbon production and reactivation, mineral roasting, proppant sintering, upgrading phosphate ores, and waste lime recovery. As production moves forward, we continue to find more uses for rotary kilns, which leads to more research and development. Rotary kilns have been useful in industrial processes and make those fields and the world more efficient and sustainable. How do rotary kilns work? The main purpose of a rotary kiln is to heat solids to the point of chemical reaction or physical change. The kiln holds the materials in place at a precise temperature and amount of time determined by temperature profiles, created upon thorough analysis of the chemical makeup of the material. The machine itself is made up of a rotating cylinder, drum, which is sized appropriately to meet the needs of time and temperature at which it should be processed. The kiln is set at a slight angle to help with moving the material through the drum. Rotary kilns are either direct fire or indirect fire type. With a direct fired kiln, a gas is fed into the drum which processes the material in direct contact, opposed to an indirect fire kiln where the material is processed through a chemically inactive environment with the heat being maintained from the outside of the kiln and the material contacting the inner shell. FECO International 2025. On to the next. All of what I said is on the beginning pages of the FICO International Rotary Kiln Handbook. If you're interested in learning more about the intricacies of the machine, you're more than welcome to visit the resource. However, I will be moving from it to the now personal aspect of this essay: processing material at high temperatures and maintaining a controlled environment. Forgive me if this is a completely absurd connection to make, but my first thought from maintaining a controlled environment was how I learned to regulate myself, even more so upon reading that one of the processes of rotary kilns was to remove volatile substances from a material. It's hard to think back to my childhood. Like, don't get me wrong, I have a lot of memories, so it's not as if I'm completely lost, but at the same time, a lot of the memories that I can think back to are not good ones, or they're fuzzy around the edges. The first thing I can remember, at least right now, sometimes my siblings and I get to talking and we bring up all these obscure things that the other one forgot, is feeling lonely at Thanksgiving breakfast in maybe second grade, sweet pumpkin bread, and salty tears. Fast forward to the quote unquote most important concert of my high school career, also known as the last one I invited my mom to. She said she'd come, and I kept looking out into the audience for her. I'd invited a bunch of my now no longer friends, and one of them pulled me aside to let me know that her car broke down. We lived less than a mile from school, and it wasn't cold out. My dad couldn't go because mom said she would, so dad had to watch the kids. Which reminds me of another time I was performing at this museum right on the edge of downtown. It was a little over a 3 mile walk back to my house. She said she was going to come pick me up after the performance, but she forgot me. It was snowing. The snow already on the ground piled up at least as high as my ankles. I didn't bring shoes or enough warm clothes for a 3 mile walk back in the snow. I made it home, took off my wet clothes, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling until I eventually passed out. There were worse times, too. Times I begged her not to drive. We went to see the Conor McGregor versus Khabib Nurmagomedov, forgive me if I said that wrong, fight at Dave & Buster's in 2018. My uncle paid for a big room where a bunch of his jujitsu or whatever it was they were training friends got together. I had churros with my cousin. Mom had some drinks, and I think she had a few more with her friend, or maybe two separate drinking sprees are mixed in my mind because I don't claim my memories are 100% accurate, since I know they change in your mind gradually over time. Either way, I remember her hitting and driving over this median in the parking lot. We dropped her friend off, and I begged her to just let us stay the night there. She thought it was funny, but she swore she was fine driving us home. I laid down across the back seat and closed my eyes, feeling every swerve. If I'd been more conscious at that point, I don't think I would have been able to handle the stress. Another time, I left my school's event early to go to my grandfather's funeral. We were running a show choir event that weekend, and I'd already coordinated with my wonderful teachers to make sure that it was okay for me to dip. I was the only one going with my mom. My other siblings stayed home, but I wanted to pay my respects. My grandpa wasn't a perfect man. Lord knows he failed my aunt, uncle, grandma, and mom plenty of times, but he was a good grandpa. He was sick from alpha 1 antitrypsin deficiency and type 1 diabetes. So a lot of the time he was rude and short because a slight miscalculation in cleanliness could mean he'd die. Anyways, it was January of 2020 when he passed. My mom got drunk at the funeral, and my grandma's brother made a pass at me. It was a terrible event overall. I wanted to leave. Again, my mom said she was safe to drive. We got pulled over by a cop for an unrelated reason. Tags didn't match the color of the car because the guy who sold it to her was an idiot. Sometimes thinking back, I wish I would have yelled, "She's been drinking!" But I don't know that it would have done anything except make my life harder. If she stayed the night in jail, I'd have to find some other person to drive me 2 hours home. And if she didn't, or when she got out, she'd make my life hell for saying that. I should have left with my aunt. A lot of times, it seemed like I was getting along with my mom, but most of it was me finding the best way to get through the situation with the least amount of harm. I was 12 years old when I started thinking more closely about how I had to protect my siblings from her. I felt like a failure when I couldn't. I feel guilty for leaving even though I've gotten most of them out of her house now. It feels like I didn't do good enough when I see how my siblings suffer from what they had to endure. Even now, it feels like it all weighs me down sometimes. I feel a sense of panic when I see an action or response of mine as conditioned through her. I don't think I'm incapable of changing it, but that doesn't make it any less scary to face. I think, though, that since leaving her, I've gradually gotten better. At first, it seemed like, oh man, where do I go from here? In fact, it felt so intimidating that I once tried to take my own life. But I spent time thinking about everything I'd done, and I know that there are people who won't forgive me for the way I treated them, and I accept that. For some of my actions, I don't deserve forgiveness, regardless of what brought them out. That the changes I have made are significant enough that when people say, you sound like her, I can take resolution or essentially feel determination in knowing that in all the ways that matter, I'm nothing like her. I set time to communicate with my people and take accountability when I mess up. I schedule time for each person and all the things I need and want to do, and I don't neglect any of them. And I don't drink anymore. I feel that I could have control over a lot of things, but when I choose certain patterns of behavior, there's a visible difference. It's like how you strengthen neural pathways through repetition. I strengthen language pathways, relationship pathways, and creative pathways. I try not to see it as I'm losing out on anything. I just chose the pathways that build me up instead of the ones that help me avoid understanding my pain. It's okay to not want to feel hurt, but sometimes the things I, or perhaps we, if you relate, do to avoid pain actually end up making it hurt worse and take much longer to heal. Maybe the point of this essay is that I'm going nowhere endlessly, but when I think and look, that's life. It just feels like peace. I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to be anyone. I can just live and create. I can be who I am without fear of who I was or should or could become. Anyways, that's all that I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this. All of my references will be linked in the Substack and Patreon links in the description, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!